All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Jonathan Edwards, and our friends at I think it's SDA. I keep screwing that up, but it's a radio station in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, for that little song, that little interlude. And we are waiting to connect with Ted Reynolds. We see that he's in our Zoom room, but we haven't seen an image yet or actually seen that he can talk. His audio is on. So, Alissa, you and I will continue to talk a little bit more about the cannabinoid medicine world. And Ted, I'll give you a little background on him. This guy spent a lot of time in labs, and I know, Alissa, you too have spent times in labs for testing of products, correct?
Yes, I love a lab test. Yes.
What's that? I mean, I'm guessing that, seeing as which people are getting onto airplanes with hazmat suits, I'm guessing that in a lab, they're wearing these really intense hazmat suits too because they don't want to infect anything. In fact, I couldn't even go into a grow room at a dispensary because I didn't have my hazmat suit with me. So needless to say, those in the industry are pretty protective of their plants that they're testing. Yes?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, I mean, Ted works with everything. Like he works with the devices that mix the products. So to make sure that there he is. Hi. That's how I first met him through like a product called the speed mixer, which I call the cookie mixer. So take all the recipes and put them together. So I'll let him share a little more with that. But yes, so we met about a year ago talking at this cannabinoid conference where he was promoting some of the manufacturing technology. So.
Well, there you go. And now I see him, and I'm going to assume that he can hear us. So now I'm going to say, hello, Ted.
Hi, Jimmy.
And how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Good. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to boost your volume a little bit so we can hear it here in the studio as well as online. But I'm going to read your bio. It says here you're a co-founder of Endosyn. Can you give us a little brief on what Endosyn is?
So Endosyn, I would call in a nutshell a cannabinoid research and development company with a focus on endocannabinoids themselves.
Gotcha. And I'm not going to ask you to list them because we all know them as ABCD, CBD, ABD, THCA, BN, CBN. I'm only kidding. I'm trying to be a goof here, and there's nothing to be goofy about cannabinoid medicine because there's so much to learn about the different molecules that make up the cannabis sativa plant. And it seems that every month or so, another one is discovered. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, just in the last few years alone, I've seen the number jump from around 80 to now over 144 that have been definitely identified. And there's, theory that there's probably much more that we haven't discovered yet.
That's just crazy. Now, obviously, we're joined by Alissa Merrill. My name's Jimmy Young, and I appreciate you coming on. It does say here in your bio that you have actually visited over 100 different cannabis labs all over North America. When you go to a lab, what exactly are you looking for?
So usually we're in the extraction or product development department. And so it's not that I'm there looking for anything in particular. They're usually seeking out our, equipment and expertise and helping them optimize their cannabis processing. So that's what I'm primarily there to do is help people make better medicine and a higher quality, faster, and be more efficient with it.
Alissa, you could jump in here anytime, but I do have one question for Ted about the extraction process. And I understand decarboxylation. How's that? I even got that out in the first time. But there's also a way to extract the magic, if you will, from the cannabis plant at home. I mean, I've seen people do it on their stoves. What is the advantage of a really big, high-priced piece of equipment versus doing it on your own at home?
Well, there'll be differences in the extracts that you're doing at home versus the ones that are produced commercially. The solvents have a lot to do with what you can do with the end product. So for, say, an at-home extraction, commonly oil, like olive oil, for example, or ethanol will be used. And those turn into primarily ingestible products or maybe even topical. but you're not going to be inhaling those types of products. So when you get over to the other solvents with like butane, propane, CO2, those typically wind up being an inhaled product because after you remove the solvents, it's a safer product to inhale versus like alcohol, ethanol based. You don't want to really inhale that. And then obviously inhaling just food oils is not going to work and probably not good for you either. So that's the primary differences between the two, at home versus commercial.
Okay, there you go. Because I mean, we're being a little light, but that vitamin E stuff that was in those vapes was not a good thing to be putting in anything that you had to inhale. I remember that part happening with the vaping crisis from a few months back. Never a dull moment in the cannabis space. I see here, excuse me?
No, I mean, I met Ted because I was questioning like, how do I find better, safer products? And he was my go-to because it kind of starts, I think, at the lab, and starts at the testing, but even before that, and how and we can talk to John more in depth, but like how it's actually extracted from the plant. So there's so many pieces to what makes a product safe, and then actually work then becomes the next challenge. So, and that's where I've really looked to his expertise. So, because we're still struggling to find good products here, I think, in Massachusetts. So, Ted, what would you say is the most exciting piece of equipment or exciting like news advancement happening right now in product development?
So I think the most exciting thing on that side is probably the development of yeast production. So much like a lot of pharmaceuticals like insulin or even B vitamins for that matter, for a lot of supplements, they're made using yeast or some kind of organism like algae or microbes. And the fact that the yeast derived cannabinoids are now feasible and in production and able to be integrated into all the cannabinoid products that are out there, I think is the most exciting. Following the model of aspirin, which is like a white willow bark derivative, to grow enough aspirin using purely natural white willow bark, you'd have to grow it in every forest on the planet. So cannabinoids looking to take the same kind of demand level to be able to keep up with that kind of production. I think the advancement of yeast is extremely exciting.
Wow. So that's like, I didn't know we were going there. I was thinking just like a good topical, but yeah, I mean, that's like it's exciting though. I'm glad you did. Cause I feel like we're always like one step further. Like, I think I'm already bored with CBD now that like, we're really able to dig in and talk about it. I'm like, let's move on to the next. And you're kind of, I think we're on the same page there. And that is, I think, an exciting direction because Jimmy, when we're talking about all this stuff, it's a plants and plants like molds and and they go bad. I mean, there's so many bad products out there, as I've learned from Ted.
Right.
Ted. So there's a lot of opportunity to do much better, but it's also a plant you're working with. So
I've got a question for Ted, and it's obvious that did you take organic chemistry in college, Ted?
Just a couple times.
Every single person I went to school with that was much smarter than me, mostly pre-med people, had to take that organic chemistry. And I just remember it really filtered out the haves from the have-nots, let's just say. Probably one of the toughest courses. But and I'm joking a little bit about this, but I got to ask this question about knowledge of the policymakers in Washington, D.C. Right now we've got the DEA pointing the fingers at the FDA and pointing the fingers at the USDA, the Department of Agriculture. No one wants to take responsibility for regulating CBD or or all the cannabinoids that are in this plant. They're all pointing each other. Well, if it's over 0.3%, that's going to be yours. Well, if it's 4%, though, it's not really mine because it's just over, whatever. Point being is, how frustrating is it for someone who's as smart as you, the scientists who understand the plant? Are you getting called to Washington? Are there people lobbying for the right thing? Are they asking for information from people like yourself, the scientists that are out there that are working in this space, or are they just making it up as they go along?
I would say it's probably a little bit of both.
Okay.
I would say on the state levels, there's definitely a lot more involvement in bringing the stakeholders, the scientists that are part of it, into the discussions and to figure out the regulatory framework. I think Colorado does a pretty good job, and I'm pretty familiar with some of the people that are in this scientific kind of lobbying group, so to speak. At the federal level, with the FDA particularly, they have called for public opinion on suggestions on how to regulate CBD. Now, it isn't a science or research only type of forum, so it's drawing in any kind of public opinion you have. So whether it's an anecdote of treating your ailment, but it's illegal in your state or what have you, there is a lot of commentary from people on suggesting how CBD should be looked at, let alone cannabis. But for the THC levels and that amount and discussion for that marijuana classification of a plant, I don't think I see a whole lot of discussion being invited in from any scientific body. And it's kind of ironic because the National Institute of Health actually has a patent on cannabinoids, including THC, as an antioxidant and neuroprotectant. So our own governmental health bodies are saying there is medical application for these cannabinoids, yet it's the rest of the three-letter agencies didn't get that memo.
Right, and it's still a Schedule 1 drug. We all get this. So let's do some hypothetical here. Let's pretend for a minute it's a month from now.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's a new administration, at least voted in to Washington, D.C., and everything's going swimmingly. And Lord knows I'd love to believe that is going to happen, but I don't for a minute. If you were in charge of the regulations for CBD infusion in beverages or in food, what would be, how would you go about doing that, and what would be your recommendations?
Dietary supplements have a pretty good framework. Some people like to say that there's, loopholes, so to speak, for unsafe products, when it's actually quite difficult to have an unsafe product in that space. You do have to do what's called as a self-affirmed GRAS study, and that's where you get a panel of scientific experts to determine the safety of your product. Now, currently, that's not being done because it's not required. We're kind of Wild West with the CBD, is nobody's taking ownership of it. But I would like to see that pathway be granted so that people could prove the safety of their products, which is the primary concern with CBD. It's not that it's a narcotic or an intoxicant. It's the safety profile needs to be established. And producers need to go through that study to prove that their products are safe by the way that they process and manufacture them, including the ancillary ingredients that they use, say for nano products. Nano products are really getting up in popularity, but there's not a whole lot of discussion about the fact that nano emulsions, once in the bloodstream, will nano emulsify the other medications in your system that are in your bloodstream. So it can amplify the effects of whatever co-medications you're taking. So that's where it gets potentially dangerous. Now, the risk factor with that is probably fairly low for the average commercial product, but for people that are immune compromised or taking it as a life-saving medication, there needs to be careful notation of the safety profiles with these products that they're taking.
There you go.
And Ted, could you speak a little bit too? So Ted's really an expert, when it comes to the endocannabinoid system. He taught me about, I never believed in any of this stuff, like fish oil. I hated when I was pregnant, but I took it and I believe in it, but I never understood it. And he really explained that how, can you speak a bit about, the endocannabinoid 101 and kind of how we can make our products work better, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll go in reverse, I guess. So at the cannabinoid conference that Alissa and I met at, there was a statement made by one of the researchers. I can't remember exactly which one, but was talking about entourage effects and the different cannabinoids and terpenes, but also endocannabinoids that can potentially synergize together for a different outcome for a medication. And what he said was, there's more iterations of cannabinoid synergies than there are stars in the observable universe. So, meaning that we have probably an infinite number of these different cannabinoid products that can be come up with for various ailments. Now, as I believe going into the future that cannabinoid medications will one day be seen as a first line treatment for almost all chronic illness. And getting into the endocannabinoid 101 will kind of explain that. So the endocannabinoid system is one of the human body's oldest regulatory system. So it's balancing homeostasis, the balance of energy essentially, and how energy is being used throughout the body. It goes back 600 million years. So we can find evidence of the ECS back in microbes in the ocean before life even sprouted legs. So it's in our mitochondria. And if you remember 8th grade biology, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So there's cannabinoid receptors on your mitochondria, and basically going up in scale of life form from there. So your cannabinoid receptors are found all throughout the cell. It's found on the outside of the cell, like many of us know. And it's also found in pretty much nearly every cell in the human body. As far as it's been identified, every tissue type has cannabinoid receptors there. It even goes so far to identify cannabinoid receptors as the most common G-coupled protein receptor in the brain. And G-coupled protein receptors are the largest class of receptors for neurotransmitters in your brain. So cannabinoid receptors are the largest class of neurotransmitter receptors in your brain, more than dopamine, endorphins, GABA, any of those. So there's been very little attention from mainstream medicine on literally the most abundant neurotransmitter receptor in your body. Going up from that, so the endocannabinoid system comprises of mainly three things. The enzymes that make it, so that convert fatty acids into an endocannabinoid, the endocannabinoid themselves, and then the receptors. And then I guess a fourth component, the enzymes that break them back down into the first two components. So the components of an endocannabinoid are primarily omega acids. And so this goes to nutrition and into pharmacology, but the omega acids we consume in our diet, you've heard for years omega-3s are good for you and blah, blah, blah. But until recently, it wasn't really known what they were doing. And so what we found, or researchers have found, is that they're making endocannabinoids, these omegas that we eat. And so that's why it's important to have a balanced omega diet for many reasons, but a primary one being the endocannabinoid system.
All right, so this is the fatty acid chain. We're going back to because Jimmy, are you following any of this? So
I'm taking notes. It's like I'm at a chemistry class and I'm taking notes.
I know. I need to dumb it down, and then I need to dumb it down further because I hardly understand it.
You can dumb it down for me. I'm comfortable with that because I flunked 8th grade biology. Go ahead.
I'm not embarrassed to say it because you know what? It's scary that doctors aren't educated this way. So it's just I think a lot of people were trying to figure out what's true and what's, everyone was for a while was taking fish oil and it was gross. I think, people just kind of gave up on it, but I kind of think, right? The trends kind of have gone up and down with fish oil and omega-3s. Am I right? Or
I mean, their sales numbers, as any indication of their growth, keep going up. So more and more people are using omega-3s.
Okay. I take them every day. Big old fat fish oil pill. Yes, ma'am. That's what I'm doing.
Okay, so that's back at the foundation. That's the fatty acid chain you were talking about.
Right. So cannabis evolved to mimic this system, which makes it highly unique as a plant species on the planet, because the plant recognized through its evolution that by making these cannabinoids, the phytocannabinoids, THC, CBD, it was feeding the endocannabinoid system of everything around it. So animals, for instance, humans have been propagating cannabis for 10,000 years, plus, and we've spread it all over the planet. So it's almost like there's this co-evolution where cannabis wanted to, reproduce, which is what organisms want to do. And it paired up with humans to feed our endocannabinoid system. And then we spread it all over the world.
Now, can we use it to knock out this goddamn virus that everybody's still freaking out about? I don't know if you follow, I'm sure you follow research, but we got to interview Dr. Igor Kovalchuk from the University of Lethbridge in Alberta, and he was doing some modeling and how COVID and cannabis, could interact, or one could stop the flow. You know who I'm talking about?
I don't know him particularly, but I've seen some of the studies that are coming out on COVID and cannabinoids.
Yeah.
And is there hope?
I definitely. There's also an endocannabinoid that many people are not familiar with that's actually been studied effective in 6 other coronaviruses in humans, human clinical trials. It's called palmitoyl ethylamide, or PEA for short. Now, if you search for PEA, you might get a few different things.
Prince Edward Agency. Sorry.
There you go.
I'm being a goof. I'm trying to lighten it up, because I got to tell you, half this conversation goes right over my head. But what you just said is very interesting to me, just because of how the endocannabinoid system works and how this COVID virus attacks a certain part of our bodies, mostly in our lungs, right?
So as far as I understand it, the primary thing is a blood clotting issue with COVID because of the inflammation. So the cytokine storm. So the cytokines being an inflammatory molecules, basically. And so cannabinoids are anti-inflammatory. All cannabinoids are anti-inflammatory.
Right.
So that's where it could potentially have use for this, is that it's diminishing the inflammation caused from COVID, rather than, like killing the virus itself, as far as I understand it.
Right. Okay. Well, do we lose his audio?
No.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't. All right. Thank you for letting me know that. I appreciate that. Gosh, yikes. All right. So I want to go back to the COVID pandemic and the virus. One of the things, it happened to a Red Sox player this year, Eduardo Rodriguez, got COVID, got positive tested, and then it attacked his heart. He had has something wrong with his heart, and they've tied it to the COVID. Mm-hmm. Is there, am I crazy to say, is there a way to undo some of the damage that COVID has done through using some of the cannabinoids that we've discovered?
That's a good question.
Woohoo!
Like a recovery, kind of, right? Like, that is kind of what we describe it as being, as a recovery. So.
Right.
Yeah. There's many ways you can look at the biochemistry and what it's shown us so far, and you could probably deduce from there that it likely has benefit for recovery because of all of the benefits that it does. Now, will there be a human clinical trial on that? Right. Not in this country, but maybe in Israel or somewhere else. But as a betting man, I would put money on it being beneficial for recovery, given all of the benefits from all cannabinoids in general.
Interesting. So
what do you take as a daily supplement, as someone who studies this, as someone who, like as an expert, what should we be taking if we're using, cannabis medically or recreationally, like just to feel better on a regular basis and to have more of a even keeledness about us, I guess?
Right. So I look at cannabinoids from cannabis as kind of a stopgap. It is temporary relief from a more systemic issue.
Okay.
So I think you go, if you have a good foundation, say with your omegas, for example, given that's the primary means of production, then go from there. So if you have a good foundation, but you're still having issues, then, start looking elsewhere. But until you fix the foundation of a house, you can make the roof look pretty, you could, put in accordion doors, whatever, the foundation of that house is still going to crumble. So I say start with the foundation, which is omegas. Primarily omega-3 DHA is the one almost all of us are deficient in, given most of us don't live near coastal cities and eat plenty of seafood, and that's almost the only source of DHA.
And that builds the fatty acid, which is the first layer, right?
That builds your cell membrane.
I'm trying to make this simple. So after all that talks, and then that omega-3 will help build a stronger cell membrane, which will help kind of guide the receptor or open. Okay.
So it helps in a few ways. So the omegas you can think of as like structure components of the cell membrane. And so the omega gives you good structure for your cannabinoid receptors to work properly because they float in the membrane.
Okay.
So they're floating around like that. But then additionally, it produces its own endocannabinoids and that have, high anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties, stuff like that. So it's kind of two-pronged. But start with omega-3 DHA, DHA specifically, not other omega-3s, but I won't get into that.
No, but DHA specifically, we can maybe share a little bit on through Pro Cannabis or Flower and Tonic about what your recommendations are. But DHA, and then do you have a certain amount that you recommend, or do you have or foods also that we can eat that might help?
Yeah, so salmon, tuna, mackerel, cod, they have DHA. So basically cold water fish. Sardines actually have a lot.
Anchovies?
I think anchovies too, yeah.
Okay.
If they're a cold water fish, yeah, most likely.
Okay. I'm one of the few people that actually have their Caesar salad with extra anchovies. Okay.
We can talk about probiotics and prebiotics, and that's the other really interesting part of this all that I think, right?
Well, that goes to the endocannabinoid system, being everywhere in the body. It's even in our microbiome. So, how our gut flora talks to the rest of our body. Well, researchers have found that our microbes will actually produce different endocannabinoids in the gut. And then off they go to communicate with the rest of the body. Even THC has been researched to influence the microbiome and promote the growth of beneficial bacteria. So there's all sorts of universal communication happening at the endocannabinoid system level. It's even thought the placebo effect could be stemming from the endocannabinoid system.
Huh.
The music, wasn't that the first real proof of the endocannabinoid system? Am I right? The study on music and
that's a recent study, yeah, but that's originally the endocannabinoid system was found because they were looking for a THC receptor in the late 80s, early 90s.
Well, thank you, Justin Bieber, because I officially love him. And he makes me, I get happy. You can't hear his song. He's got a new song. You just can't help it make you happy. And that's, I believe, the endocannabinoid system. So I'll take my fish oils, right? And no, I'm sorry, not fish oil, my DHA.
DHA. Okay. And is that just built into our foods, or can you actually just enhance? Can you go to a nutrition store and get DHA pills?
What you'll find is that you never find it alone. DHA is not really available alone. Yeah. And I wouldn't recommend to take it just alone. Okay. But it is the primary one that we're all deficient in. So there are extra DHA fish oil or algae oil that you can get to come up and boost your levels.
Wow. This is great. I got to tell you, Ted, I'm really impressed. I mean, first of all, I'm going to admit, I took a lot of notes. I kind of followed where you were going with this. I've done a lot of research. I've certainly talked to enough people that I understand the whole basis of the endocannabinoid system and the role it plays in our neurotransmitters. But everybody thinks I know a lot about cannabis now, and it's a joke when I talk to somebody like you, because it's like, I didn't take chemistry in college.
I mean, they don't teach you this in college. You gotta the whole endocannabinoid system stuff. You gotta go self-teach on that one, because it's not really available.
There you go. Well, we do know that there's a little movement going on that we may actually start to see more of this being taught at colleges and in med schools. And there are more and more universities that are finally understanding that this is a plant medicine, and there's so many fascinating different aspects of it that they're finally looking at perhaps doing more studies. And if we move forward and get this stuff decriminalized and open up the research, all of a sudden you're going to have research assistants and jobs and grants. And the more knowledge we have, the better we're going to understand the role that this plant has played for thousands of years in all of our bodies, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we certainly hope that that happens. Well, Ted Reynolds, I really appreciate you taking some time, giving me a little chemistry lesson. I appreciate that. I have my notes, and if you do want to send me a quiz on email, I'll give it my best shot.
I grade on a curve, so.
Fair enough. And if it's me against Alissa, I give up. All right, here, because I go to her for my expertise whenever I need something like that. So.
And that's where this industry is so scary, because sometimes it's like 6 degrees of separation, but these are the experts we should be looking to. And so I'm grateful for your time, Ted. Thank you.
That's right. And we've got a big expert coming up in just a few minutes. Dr. John McKay is going to be joining us. So Ted Reynolds, by the way, can people get in touch with you? You're a public speaker. I see that on here. How do people get in touch with you?
I would say LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. Ted Reynolds. You'll see my picture. It'll say Endosyn, Canna Complete, Speed Mixer on there. And you can find me there pretty easily. And that's where
I found your bio. So thank you, Ted Reynolds, for joining us. Appreciate it. And again, this is Medicinal Mondays on the Cannabis Chat Show on the Pro Cannabis Media channel on Twitch, and it's also on YouTube, and it's on Facebook. It's on the procannabismedia.com website as well. And Alissa joins me just about every Monday to talk about cannabinoid medicine. And coming up in just a few minutes, we'll be talking with one of the premier authorities on this subject, Dr. John McKay. But first, we're going to give you a little taste of what we've done, a little proof of performance, we call it a sizzle reel. It just kind of showcases what we've done over the last year. And we'll come back on the other side with our next interview as Cannabis Chat continues after this.